very, very high debt levels, excessive plunder, and a bullish leadership. I think since 2 months ago, our youth, who are well represented here, led us in saying enough was enough. As the state tried to raise more revenue and do nothing on issues of transparency and accountability, the youth led all Kenyans. And I think there are surveys that have been undertaken, and not even the times of Kibaki when you would be asked, who do you trust the most? Religious leaders. Right now we all trust Gen Z because they are resetting. Unfortunately, the gallant patriots who led the Gen Z revolt, so far we have 60 of them who've been declared dead through extrajudicial execution. And I want us to request that we all stand for a moment of silence to honor the 60, while fully aware there are another 60 who are considered to have disappeared, and there is no trace of them anywhere else as we pursue accountability. Thank you very much. One of the ones we know is Rex Masai, and all their blood cannot be in vain. Against that background, today's assembly is convened by the will of the people and guided by the spirit of justice and accountability. We gather here today as citizens in the spirit, the manner, the form, the substance of Article 1 of the Constitution, that we are the custodians of our nation's future, united by a common cause and driven by collective responsibility to reclaim our country from the stranglehold of debt and corruption. The participants who are here today registered through an online platform. All of them decided to block their calendars, take their time, mobilize their own resources to be here. And as a coalition, nearly every partner decided that this is an important cause that we will all contribute to. This is testament that if the government was committed to accountabilities, Kenyans are more than ready and committed for that economic reset. In the last 2 months, at TISA, we believe and hope for a day when we will have citizens who are empowered to demand accountability from government. In recent times, we have been saying we are living the TISA dream because Kenyans are unforgiving of leaders who are running away from accountability. Today, we believe from what has been seen, I think during the campaign period, you all had, there was this discussion, and even the first BBI, that Kenya has a culture of corruption. Have we heard that? Were we okay with that? That Kenya has a culture of corruption, so what we need to do is learn how to live with it. What Kenyans have said in the last 2 months, very loud and clear, is we are actually intolerant. We are allergic to thieves and to corruption. We are allergic. They get us nauseated. They kill us. And what we now want to do is ensure that Kenya becomes a bedrock of virtuous good governance. Virtuous good governance. Is it possible? Is it something that we are committed to make a reality? If we take this particular path where we are free of corruption, we believe it is time that Kenya becomes an economic giant, following in the fingerprints of the Asian tigers, and that all Kenyans will now lead a dignified lives. There's an African proverb that says, she who is destined for power does not have to fight for it. He who is destined for power does not have to fight for it. Is that true? Is that true? Very, very high chances. Most people are saying that is not true. I am just a few years out of my youth according to the Constitution, but if I was a politician, I am 100% youth. I choose to stay with the Constitution and say I am no longer youth. But when I was a youth, we were told you had to fight for a space at the table. Power is not given. It is taken. But in Kenya, people fight so hard for power that once they are in power, all they do is bully and lord over us. If they must fight for power, know they are fighting for something that is not very good. But if they come and convince us that they want to be our leaders, then there's a chance that ultimately we will get accountable servant leadership. What we have seen in the pushback against reforms that have been proposed, from the rejection of the finance bill that is now being reintroduced, the dismissal of cabinet and soon thereafter a reappointment, the sneaking of a debt audit through unconstitutional mechanism for such a fundamental process tells us the people in power are fighting for power, not keen to serve us as servant leadership. Sam has told us about the amount of the deficit we have this year, which will be borrowed. My own calculation, on average, let's say we have a deficit of $1 trillion. Because it's about 800 and something. The Finance Act, I can see the lawyers who are before the Supreme Court here. They will tell us what happened at the Supreme Court. If you take away the revenue that had been plugged in by the Finance Act 2023, the deficit, without a doubt, will go to $1 trillion. And in Kenya, what happens whenever there is a deficit, rarely do we shrink it. Through supplementary budget, the deficit increases. So we are supposed to borrow $1 trillion. But do we know how much we are supposed to repay this year in public debt? Those who do not know, in this room you'll be with experts of crunching those numbers. They had whispered to me that we are paying 1.85 trillion. Okay? The amount of money that we taxpayers of Kenya must repay in debt this year is 1.85 trillion. Yet this year we will still borrow how much? We simuende na mimi na hii madhafu ama? We will still borrow 1 trillion, but we must pay 1.8. Simple mathematics or logic. Hii deni yenye tutakopa ni ya kufanya nini? Si ndio? Tutakopa ndio tulipe hii 1.85, na bado haitakuwa imetosha, si ndio? Na haitapungua, deni haitapungua. The bulk of money that we are paying is penalties, commitment fees, and interest. Kenyans, hii deni yote ilienda wapi? Where did our debt go? I am hoping you are still very happy as a Kenyan. Are we such poor investors? Are we? We have very many commercial banks. But think about two banks that are even three, that are 100% Kenyan founded. Equity has been making profit. Family Bank. Yani hao watu wawezi pelekwa treasury basi na wapelekwe CBK ndio tukope na to invest in the right way. We know the problem. Pesa yetu ya deni na ya ushuru inaibiwa. Na ikishaibiwa tunaongezewa ushuru ndio tulipe. As a result of that particular increment, what has happened? Those people with children in public schools, what is happening there? We are not sure whether our children will open next week or not, because teachers are downing their tools. There is no capitation that is going to schools. What is happening to our health facilities? There are no services, or they are significantly diminished. That is not the Kenya we wanted. And therefore today, I want to thank you for joining us. We have rallied different experts, citizens who have over the years done their bit in demanding accountability, artists who have decided our profit, our little livelihood will come from ensuring Kenyans understand why it matters to take us the right step as a patriotic Kenya and demand accountability. We are here, and hopefully by the end of this forum, we will have laid down what we must do to ensure that we get a forensic debt audit. Secondly, what we must do so that people stop entertaining us with remarks, Sindio, with more dialogues, what we must do to ensure that all thieves of public money are prosecuted. And finally, we will definitely be told we are on a path of austerity. But for a country like Kenya, there can be no austerity without ensuring that the micro, small and medium sector, the informal sector, has enough incentives to grow. The manufacturing sector, the people who are employed and pay very high black tax, have something left over to take to a circle. So what must we do as a country to ensure that we have austerity measures that reduce the budget deficit, but ultimately foster economic growth? In the words of our mother, Wangari Maathai, we cannot tire or give up. I know some of us are feeling really bogged down. Sindio? Ni nini hatujafanya? Ni nini hatujafanya? Who has a new script of what else we have not done on accountability? People have decided to go and record photos of projects that have been advertised. We are doing accountability, yet we have people who are paid using taxpayers' money to follow up on the accountability. We have composed songs. We have gone on the streets. We've even been killed. Some of us, for the finance bill, we went there. We were even asked, are we still taking a haircut? We said no. We are now being skinned so that we bleed. Sindio? And you can see on that banner there, there's an African coalition that has been speaking to stop the bleeding. Because when you steal, it is like a painful wound or a disease where you bleed somebody slowly until they finally die. Allow me at this point to introduce what we want to be the rallying call on social media. Our hashtag today will be funga wezi usikope. Si tukifunga wezi tutaachana na deni? Tafadhali, kwa simu yako, hashtag ya leo ni nini? Funga wezi usikope. And as we listen to everybody else, I am sure part of the path we must walk so as to reduce the public borrowing and excessive taxation is that wezi lazima waende jela. Having said that, I welcome you all to today's Citizens Conference. And Sam, I request that the ambassador comes next. He has requested not to be at the end, sababu amesema yake ni salamu.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jambu. I must say that this has been a very high restart. And I'm from the Norwegian Embassy. I'm the deputy. Sorry, can you hear me now? Good morning, Ian. I'm the deputy head of mission at the Norwegian Embassy. And I'm very pleased to be here this morning to just give a small welcoming remarks at this Debt and Anti-Corruption Assembly. First of all, I would like to acknowledge our partner, the Institute for Social Accountability, for organizing this assembly together with the Africa Forum and Network on Debt and Development. I don't think I need to introduce Tisa. The previous speaker did that very well. I'm very pleased to see also other partners that Norway have in the room. It's not only TISA, but it's also the Budgeting Hub and Mesalendo. And also, it's a lot of organizations here who have support from NORAD, the aid agency in Norway. And I apologize for the Swahili, but I really appreciate the fiery and the lively intensity in the room. I think that has been a very good start because Norway is very proud to partner with TISA on their work on transparency and accountability in public finance management. The aim is kind of clear. It's securing basic human rights through essential public services and making the Constitution of Kenya, which is one of the best when it comes to the Bill of Rights, a lived reality for citizens of this country. Norway has a relatively small support, but I think a very strategic support to civil society. And I think I can sum it up in one word. And that is that we want to support the implementation of the constitution in Kenya. And even coming from a country far up north in the Scandinavia, where we also believe we have a very progressive constitution, I think it's fair to say that you have an even more progressive constitution than we have. So our role is trying to support that. And when it comes to supporting the implementation of the Constitution, transparency and access to information are rights well anchored in the Kenyan Constitution. What we talk about today is right now smack in the middle of implementation of the Constitution. It's vital that these rights are fully applied when it comes to public finance information to ensure that it's accessible, understandable, and that citizens can use it to hold officials accountable. This involves not only complying with the law on access to information, but also going beyond it to create an environment where transparency is the norm. And I think, again, discussions like this, the development we have seen in Kenya, is also important in order to contribute to making this an environment where this transparency is the norm. So as you engage in these discussions, and I'm sure there will be very lively discussions, I urge you not to lose sight of the human element. A human rights-based approach to public finance insists that all development initiatives, funded by public debt or otherwise, must prioritize the well-being of the people. This means ensuring that the benefits are equitably distributed also for vulnerable groups. So when I saw the program for this 2 days event, the assembly, I must say that it was a lot of technical language. And I see that the title, and I try Swahili again, you have to forgive me. The Ukua Uchumi is a little bit more catchy than all the technical languages. But I think that it points to one thing, and that is that public engagement is crucial in this field. It's extremely crucial. And judging from the recent demonstrations in Kenya, the issue of transparency and fiscal policy is right in the center of Kenyan politics today. The youth of Kenya are obviously ready to take on this issue. There's no doubt about that. And I think also civil society definitely is. So discussions, debates, assemblies such as these, and lively public participation, I would also add music from what I've seen this morning, was a very nice start of the day, are all vital parts of what I would call the engine of democracy. And remember that the engine of the democracy is also what fuels policy discussions. So if there is more dynamic, if there's a temperature in the discussion, it will also fuel policy discussions. So therefore, I urge each of you to actively participate in today's and tomorrow's discussion. Your insights are crucial, and your perspective and your presence shows commitment to the future of Kenya. Thank you so much, and I wish you 2 fruitful days.
He deserves a better clap, really, for the support and speaking to us, and for also reminding us that Kenya has a more progressive constitution than many countries. The question is about what we do with that information. Now, the next person who will be speaking to us, you may recall that before the 2022 election, there was a list of 241 people that had sought to run for political office. The ACC said there were questions into their integrity. Handed that list to the Electoral Commission, IEBC. IEBC made a decision that there was presumption of innocence until proven guilty, and exhausted all avenues of appeal. As we speak, some of them, if not most, hold public offices or state offices, if you like. Recently, or 2 years ago or so, there were questions that appeared at Parliament about vetting of cabinet secretaries. EACC wrote letters. But again, presumption of innocence until proven guilty, and exhausted all avenues of appeal. When they were asked, Kenyans said, about 33% said that they took a bribe during the election time. Majority said that despite taking the bribe, it did not interfere with their decision at the ballot. What does this mean, and where does it leave us? Sheila Masinde has been working with the Transparency International and has experience working in that space for more than 20 years now. She'll be joining us on stage to speak to us about the state of affairs, again, where we need to go, and if there is hope with a progressive constitution that also allows presumption of innocence. You may use the stairs on the other side. And so as she comes, we put our hands together to listen to her.
Sam, did you say I have 20 years experience, or I'm 20 years?
20 years of experience.
Correction, I'm a Gen Z, I'm 20 years. Sometimes so daunting when you hear that your experience is as old as a Gen Z, but we keep moving. AMS, that's for you too, because we're in university together. So say that for AMS as well. Viva, comrades, viva! Viva! Viva, comrades, viva. Siwaski, viva, comrades, viva. Yeah, we need to shake the room. Viva, taxpayers, viva. Viva. Viva, debt payers, viva. Diana has reminded us, sisi niliwalipa deni. Forward with integrity, forward. Forward with integrity, forward. But down with corruption. Down with corruption. Down with odious debt. Down with odious debt. Na Diana amesema tufunge wezi. Funga wezi usikope. I think that's a very important clarion call. Because as Sam Gituku has reminded us, that even with this level of debt, with this number of questions about how money is being spent, we're still putting the wrong people in public office. And we were reminded of that 2 weeks ago, when despite the EACC's advisory to Parliament, that one particular individual had a case to answer, not a case, but cases to answer, and he shouldn't be considered for nomination as Cabinet Secretary, Parliament still went ahead, and the President still went ahead to appoint this person. And for me, it was quite a disappointment, because despite the bloodshed that we had seen in the last 2 months, despite the demands that had been made by Kenyans about the need to clean up the public sector, the President unashamedly gave us a person who was being actively investigated for several cases in regard to corruption. And that person is now sitting pretty in a cabinet office, and I think this week we'll be having a huge homecoming party in Kakamega. Honestly, if that action just took us several moments back in the fight against corruption, when we thought that we were moving forward with integrity after all the Gen Z protests, I think that was a low moment for us. But we don't give up. There are currently some cases in court about Chapter 6. I see lawyer Evans Ogada here. I know he's taken one matter to court in regard to the vetting process. There is also another case challenging the appointment of a couple of individuals who had questions to answer in regard to corruption, and we hope that Kenyans will get the accountability that is required. So this conference is really coming at an opportune moment for us. Kenya has been at an inflection point, but how do we move? Are we moving forward? Are we going to move back, or are we just going to stay stagnated in regard to the fight against corruption and in regard to the various questions we've asked about debt? At the heart of the issues that Kenyans have been raising in the last month, at the center of the problem is corruption, which has been manifested in the unexplained wealth that has been shoved at our face, by public officers. We've seen that, yeah? The expensive socks, the expensive belts, the expensive shoes, the expensive watches, on the face of desperate Kenyans who are experiencing and bearing so much hardship. We've seen that in the poor service delivery. How many people have running water in their homes? In Nairobi, wangapi mko na maji? If you open your tap, wachana na hiyo maji ambayo, the one that we pump up for those who can afford the pumps, the middle class who afford pumps and you can store in your tanks. But even without those pumps and tanks, we actually would not be having running water, because many of us receive water only once a week. I live in a place where we receive water only 10 hours a week. I've lived in that particular area for more than, well, I won't say, but for most of my life, I've lived in Nairobi in a particular area, yeah? And I have never in my life experienced flowing water for more than a week since the 80s when I started living in Nairobi. So it is so daunting for many Kenyans just to get simple services, water, health, education. We pay taxes for some of this, but you still have to dig deeper in your pockets. I've seen Kenyans have to pay to repair roads. I live in an area where, as residents, we actually had to contribute to just repair our road, just here in South Sea. Yeah? That's how hard or difficult life has been. And this is us middle class. Now I'm just imagining how life is for other citizens. And so you ask yourself, where are our taxes going? We are paying more, but getting less in terms of services. That is how corruption is being manifested. Having to seek private services for public amenities. Of course, the other complication in how corruption has also been manifested is, of course, the high cost of living, the high levels of public debt, with really no tangible development that is commensurate to the amounts borrowed. I think Diana has just explained that aspect in regard to debt and the struggles around that. And for us as people who've worked in anti-corruption, the continued high taxation of citizens without accountability is just purely extortion and blatant disregard of the provisions of the social contract between us and the government, and this must change. So for us today, we are joining the Okwaa Uchumi Coalition in this debt and anti-corruption summit, and we really just want to underscore the challenge that we continue to experience in regard to corruption in the public sector, and really now start asking for accountability in terms of how our money is used, but even how debt is procured and managed. We must address and say enough is enough with the leakages that we continue to see through corruption, illicit financial flows, money laundering, and various other elements or manifestations of corruption. We all know, and we've had various government authorities tell us about the amount of money that we're losing to corruption, the Auditor General's Office, the National Treasury, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. What we have asked is, please, once and for all, tell us what is the cost of corruption. But many of them have pointed to the fact that we are losing almost 600 billion annually to corruption. The Corruption Perception Index by Transparency International currently scores Kenya at 31 out of 100. 31 out of 100. Those guys who recently sat their KCSE, 31 ni E ama D? Is it an E or a D? If I score 31 out of 100, is that an E or a D minus? Somewhere around there, right? Surely, a whole Kenya scoring an E on corruption. And that is really the score. In fact, 31 is high because we've been oscillating between 25 and 32 points in the last 10 years, which also tells you that we're not just deteriorating, but in essence, there seems to be a bit of stagnation. Why are we just staying between 25 and 32 points in the last, actually it's more than 10 years, maybe around 12 years or so? Despite all the efforts, we have developed laws, we have developed policies, we have created institutions. I mean, taxpayers are pumping billions of shillings into institutions. The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, the Asset and Recovery Agency, even Parliament, even Judiciary, all these are tasked with a specific mandate in regard to addressing corruption. Why aren't we seeing the levels of corruption going down despite all the efforts that we have put in place? It then takes us back to, do we have the political will? And I think I've just demonstrated that in the fact that despite all this noise that has been made, and I think what was quite curious, actually, if you noticed, in the statement that the president gave where he appointed the second last appointments, where he appointed the ODM members of parliament, he also had a longer statement where he talked about some measures that the government was going to do to fight corruption. He talked about, embedding whistleblower protection provisions in the Witness Protection Act. He talked about something around the conflict of interest bill and giving commitment that the government will ensure that the conflict of interest bill is passed and strong provisions are maintained. And he also talked about amendments that would be made to some laws to expedite the investigation and prosecution and adjudication of corruption cases. But no sooner had you put the dot on the corruption measures that you're going to take, and the next sentence tells us that you're appointing someone who has a corruption case to answer. Do we have the goodwill? Do we? Thank you. So we have quite a bit of work to do. The other thing that possibly I think is important for us to address at this point, and which is still worrying, because we're not hearing the government talking much about it, is the recent grey listing of Kenya by the Financial Action Task Force, meaning that Kenya has been put on an increased monitoring status because of our inefficiencies in addressing money laundering and terrorism financing. And it really just tells you that despite the laws, because in 2010 we were grey listed, and we had to quickly put together laws, the Proceeds of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering Act, which led to the formation of certain entities like the Financial Reporting Center and the Asset Recovery Agency. But what the Financial Task Force is telling us is that despite all these measures that you took almost 14, 13 years ago, we're still seeing a great problem in terms of how you are handling money laundering and terrorism financing. And that's the same picture of corruption. We have the laws, we have the institutions, but why aren't we implementing our laws to then realize real reforms? So we have that particular problem, but we need to press the government further to ensure that we get off the grey list. And the concern currently is that as we continue to stay on that grey list, it has significant implications on Kenya, including reduced foreign aid and investment, because it's affecting our ability to secure foreign aid and investments. There are questions on Kenya. I mean, are we a money laundering hub? Why would I, as an investor, want to bring money here? What does it mean for my business? There are also increased compliance costs, because anyone who's moving money to Kenya means that you're under extreme increased scrutiny. And so it's taking a lot of time for foreign businesses or anyone who wants to bring or send money to Kenya. That further complicates our economic recovery. So it's affecting investor confidence. It's putting obstacles to international trade and payments. So we need the government to also address these issues around corruption and money laundering, even as we deal with the issues around debt, because we'll not deal with the economic challenges without addressing those fundamental issues. So we really look forward to the outcomes of this conference to help us get our way forward in terms of how we address corruption, but also its, I don't know, the child, I don't know how to call it its twin brother or sister or a child. I think the issues with debt, I probably maybe say is a child of corruption. So corruption, the mother, public debt, the child, high taxation is also a child of corruption. How do we deal with this? And I believe we have an important opportunity seated here in this Citizens Summit to be able to deal with these issues. So we really look forward to the outcomes. As Transparency International Kenya, we are supporting this summit because we believe that we can be able to get real solutions from the citizens. The government has been unable to give us any solutions. We thought that we were going to address after these last 2 months, but clearly you can see we are taking steps backwards. We need to take steps forward, and I believe you, citizens of Kenya, will help us take those steps forward. I will stop there, but viva taxpayers, viva! Viva, viva comrades, viva! Viva. Forward with integrity, forward! Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheila. And she referenced what may have come from the head of state, that corruption cases would be concluded within 6 months. Maybe, Sheila, there's a question you didn't ask. What does conclusion mean? Yeah? Okay. Now, we're also live on Xspace. If you may want to join or to ask your colleagues and friends to join, you can do so. The title of the Xspace is Debt and Anti-Corruption Citizen Assembly, Day 1. It is hosted by Okwa Uchumi and KE. And if you prefer to have access to visuals, you can do so on the YouTube channel, Okwa Uchumi Kenya. And you can become part of the movement by speaking on social media, on X, the hashtag Fungawezi Usikope. Now, as we move to the next speaker, there's something I wish that you also reflect on. Sometime last year, the Auditor General issued a report covering the financial years 2019-2020 to 2021-2022, and she had found that there were commitment fees that were paid of up to 5.35 billion shillings for external debts that were never disbursed. Meaning, there were delays in commencement of projects, and some that had started actually stalled because there was some prerequisite work that was not done. Unfortunately, even in procurement of external debt, you find that it's not as open as it should be, that it's single sourcing of creditors. As you think about that, I want to introduce Jason Rosario Braganza, who is a Kenyan economist with over 10 years of experience working on working on international development in Africa, and is the executive director at the African Forum and Network on Debt and Development, AFRODAD. Jason's work has focused on trade and regional integration, finance for development and tax, illicit financial flows, and domestic resource mobilization, as well as poverty and inequality. He has served in various roles in the civil society, including a co-head and program director on tax at the International Lawyers Project, where he was well schooled also with a master's degree in development economics from the University of Sussex in the UK, and an undergraduate degree in economics from the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. Please help us understand what exactly we are doing in the borrowing.
Thank you very much. I think corruption starts with the kind of profile you send to be used to introduce you. Viva, comrades, viva! Viva! Viva, comrades, viva! Viva! Good morning, everyone. How are we doing? I'm seeing even the backbenchers along there are also still awake and with us. So before I get into my remarks, I'm going to name a few countries, and I just want you to shout the word present when I name those countries, or when as I list those countries. Nigeria. I'll explain later. Louder. Nigeria. Present. Uganda. Present. Ghana. Present. Senegal. Present. Sri Lanka. Present. Argentina. Present. Bangladesh. Present. Those are just to name a few where in the last few weeks and months, citizens have decided that power belongs with the people. Kenya is well represented. I'm coming there. But I'm glad we're all paying attention. That's fantastic. The reason I mentioned, and I start off with those countries, comrades, is because it is to show that the issues we are talking about and as we're grappling with as Kenyans are not just Kenyan issues. They are African issues, they are international issues, but most importantly, they are global South developing country issues. And in all of that, they are people, human beings, whose lives, livelihoods, and dignity are always at threat or at risk. So with that, allow me to begin with my protocols. Because this is a citizens' assembly, for the citizens, by the citizens, I will begin by recognizing and acknowledging all the citizens of Kenya who are here in person and joining us virtually from different parts of the country. And if in the diaspora, and I don't mean outside Nairobi, I mean outside the country, we are extremely proud and pleased to be here with you. To the government officials that are represented here, the honorable members of the National Assembly, if they are brave enough to come and sit with us today. To the comrades and friends of the Okoa Uchumi Coalition, I want to also recognize Comrade Faith Odhiambo, the LSK president, who is here. The Dr. Nyankango, who is the controller of budget, who is also with us here. And also the deputy ambassador of the Norwegian embassy, who was with us a few moments ago. So good morning. Once again, comrades, citizens, mine is to give 3 big points about why we are here today. I work for an organization that is Pan-African in nature, but also works on issues of international economic governance and tries to explain why some of the challenges we are facing at the national level may also stem from the way the international economic, political, and social order is structured. Allow me to begin, first of all, to talk about something we often refer to as the political economy of economic governance and the political economy of political negotiations at the international system and at the international level. The system we work in as a country, as a people, and as a community is rigged by design, not by any other purpose. It's not accidental. We operate in a system that has been designed to extract, to exploit, and to prioritize those who are in power, to prioritize those who have wealth, and most importantly, prioritize those who believe in the market. And I'll come to this in a moment. The political economy construct of our debt challenges and anti-corruption suggests that we protect those who are in power while we leave those who are invulnerable to carry the burden of keeping us in power. Both Diana and Sheila have referenced this in their remarks. We often see and talk about international collaboration, international partnership, what we call our development partners. But where have they been? Of the last 8 to 10 weeks, where have they been? In this country, other than saying we are appalled, we want the Constitution to be upheld. But the loans are still coming. The debt is still being accumulated. Our international macroeconomic police, called the IMF, have been in town. Did they reach out to you? But they will put in their press release, we did citizen engagement, or we met with civil society. And they've signed another loan. The international system is rigged by design to keep us in a perpetual state of dependency, to keep us in a perpetual state of outsourcing our governance structure to international markets and to protect the market at any particular time over people. Allow me to drill what this means at our national level as Kenyans. Over the last 10 weeks, one of the very first media interviews that were given by the head of state, and I know Sam was there, asking him, is it true that you're actually talking about businesses and markets and corporates when people's lives have been lost? This is the system that we are being taught. This is the system that is running this country of ours, where we protect profits, we protect corporates, rather than actually looking at the human lives and the desecration of human dignity in which we survive in. The corporate bottom line is what matters, not the fact that the public schools are not going to open next week, not that doctors and nurses have to go hours upon hours, sometimes with delayed pay, yet they have to sacrifice their time to look after those who need public attention and medical attention. It's extremely important for us to pay close attention to this international dynamic because it translates at the national level. It translates in how we do our policy. It translates how we do our legal framing of our policies and the laws that protect those policies. So the second point is, where do we go from here? And what are the things during this citizen assembly we need to pay attention to? You will hear two words quite a bit over the next 2 days, something called fiscal consolidation and the other one called austerity. Comrades, these are bad words. They are such bad words, I even get nauseated reciting them. Do not normalize these words. Understand what they mean, but do not normalize these words. These words means there is no investment in public services. These words mean that doctors, nurses, teachers go without pay. These words mean that they would rather protect businesses than invest in citizens. These words mean that the government would rather pay its creditors than invest in you as citizens. These are really, really bad words. But understand them when we talk about budgets. The government will tell you we have not touched the development budget for constructions of schools or the construction of hospitals or clinics and dispensaries. But when you look on the other side, the public sector wage bill side of the budget, they are reducing the number of teachers that are being taught or being recruited. They are reducing the number of doctors that are being trained and recruited. These are terrible, terrible, terrible words. The other point, under where do we go from here, is to remember that 2024 is year 1 of 30. We've just started. The Gen Z movement has just started. Those of you who are telling Baba to relax and rest, we've got this, it's taken him over 30 years to allow us to say that to him. This is year 1 of 30. The struggle began in 2024. Let the history books write that. We don't stop. We do not tire. We do not fatigue. Because as citizens, that's what it means to fight for your rights. That's what it means to deal with impunity. That's what it means to deal with issues of debt, issues of anti-corruption. But more substantively to the theme of this Citizens' Assembly, anti-corruption, or rather corruption, is a disease. And as Sheila has put it, it has links to everything. It affects how much government can raise in terms of revenue, which translates to the debt that the government then has to take on. And it's not always about money. Corruption it's a value system that is created. If we normalize it, it becomes a chronic disease in our society, and it can be fatal, like any chronic disease. It can kill. It does kill. And so as we talk about the linkages between debt, corruption, and what we need to do about it, let us remember, and let us not tire and allow it to fester into a chronic and fatal disease. Because it will kill, it will erode our society, it will erode the morals fabric that binds us as human beings, as citizens. And this all links back up to the international economic governance system. Because as we talk about corruption, let us not lose sight that these issues are all interrelated. The geopolitics of why this continues to happen in our country, we need to explain, explore, and understand what that means. So what are our solutions as I wrap up? We must keep up the pressure. Let us remember this is year 1 of 30. And I think by that time the Gen Zs are going to be, I don't know the Greek alphabet very well, but I don't know if they'll be Gen Theta or Gen something. And they'll be the ones who will be here. Yeah? So let us keep up the pressure. We have won significant battles over the last 10 weeks. We have drawn inspiration from young people who've decided enough is enough. Secondly, let's stop the bleeding. The Stop the Bleeding campaign, the sign is over there. Illicit financial flows, odious debt, inconceivable debt servicing at the expense of investments in public services. We need to stop the hemorrhage. Whether it is using the judicial system, whether it is using investigations, whether it is using public participation, let us stop the bleeding using all these different avenues. Let us keep on piling up the pressure. At a more practical level, let us talk about how we can improve the debt management of this country. We have very progressive frameworks, policies. We've got institutions and departments within the National Treasury, within the Central Bank, and other independent agencies that look after debt. So let us pay attention. For example, why don't we ask for the Debt Management Office to be independent of the National Treasury so that it has breathing space to do its work, so that it's not just a statistical agency within the National Treasury. It can do some analysis, it can make recommendations, it can do cost-benefit analysis on loans that are being considered by government. These are just one of the few examples that I hope and I'm sure we'll be discussing over the next 2 days. But remember, this is year 1 of 30. If there is anything that we take away from these 2 days, we have only just started, and particularly for Gen Z, we have only just started. And I think with those few remarks, I want to pause here and just say, Aluta! Aluta! Thank you very, very much.
All right, a better clap for him as he goes to sit. And it is not to say that Sheila didn't deserve a better clap when she was going to sit, but for the sake of sorting out historical injustices, we clap for Sheila as well. Now, our next speaker will help us understand what exactly is it that we haven't done with our laws. When we are promised that there will be amendment of a few clauses here and there so that cases are concluded within 6 months, what is it that we haven't touched that we need to touch? And when I asked that question to Sheila, I was just wondering, does withdrawing a case also amount to conclusion? Now, Faith Odhiambo is a distinguished advocate of the High Court with over 13 years of experience, and she has honed her skills in a diverse array of legal areas, including commercial law, competition law, telecommunications law, financial services and banking law, and alternative dispute resolution. She also teaches at the University of Nairobi, and she recently became the 51st president of the Law Society of Kenya. Karibu sana mtukufu rais.
Allow me to adopt the protocols as were previously pronounced. Viva, comrades, viva. Viva. That's boring. Viva, comrades, viva. Viva, viva comrades, viva. Viva. Then I go back to my normal. Good morning, everyone. First, Sam is setting me up because that was not what I was going to speak about, but I'll see if I can touch on areas. I must say that Sam was our moderator in one of our very, let's say, tough debates. Did I do well, Sam? And withdrawing a case is not settling. Funny to say that I was in a gathering yesterday and I mentioned withdrawal of cases, and I was like, you know, those are part and parcel of the things where people are raising concern in our office, our constitutional offices that should be serving and ensuring they're fighting corruption. So when you tell us that you want to tighten the laws, start with the laws that you have and ensure that you're not withdrawing cases. So ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, fellow citizens, good morning. I'm profoundly honored to address this distinguished assembly, convened at the pivotal moment in our nation's journey towards fiscal responsibility, transparency, and the rule of law. I wish to commend my sincere appreciation to the Institute of Social Responsibility, TISA, and Diana for her energy, the Okoa Uchumi campaign for the unwavering commitment to advancing the discourse on public debt and anti-corruption, issues that strike at the very heart of our constitutional democracy. It's my pleasure to also see friendly faces today, some familiar, determined and resolute, ready to tackle the beast that is public debt and corruption. You know that I was when I was first asked to speak here, I thought to myself, public debt and corruption, interesting. Two of Kenya's most enduring and unwelcome guests. They came as visitors, but those visitors who say, ata, mattress ni sawa, tutalala. And they have stayed on, unwelcome. They have stayed for the weekend. They have stayed for the month. You're asking each other in the house, when are these guests leaving? But they have no intention of moving out. But jokes aside, the gravity of our gathering cannot be overstated. We are here because we are deeply concerned about the future of our country, a future that is currently teetering between the weight of our debt burden that seems to grow faster than our children. And as a mother, I can tell you surely, it's growing faster than our children. We are gathered here today as stewards of public interest, tasked with a solemn duty to scrutinize, challenge, and propose reforms to the very structures that govern our economic and financial management. The stark reality of Kenya's ballooning public debt, now exceeding $1 trillion, demands our immediate and collective attention. This is not merely an economic concern, it is a profound legal and ethical issue that affects the sovereignty of our state and the fundamental rights of our citizens. The Constitution of Kenya 2010 places the responsibility for prudent public financial management squarely on the shoulders of our state institutions. The Public Finance Management Act, among other legal frameworks, mandates transparency, accountability, and participation on all financial decisions affecting the public. However, the alarming levels of public debt and the pervasive corruption in our systems suggest that these legal safeguards are being systematically undermined. This assembly must therefore serve as a clarion call for the enforcement of these laws and restoration of integrity in our public finance management. Our objective is clear: to unpack the complex fiscal architecture that has led us to this precise moment, to propose strategic reforms that ensure debt sustainability, and to reinforce mechanisms that will eradicate the corruption and impunity that continue to undermine our nation's development. Some of you might have heard that I was recently appointed to join the Public Debt Audit Committee. However, after a thorough examination of the legal framework, something that I did with great enthusiasm, I assure you that I had to politely decline the invitation. And why, do you ask? This is a question that I receive on several occasions, and I said, since I'm here, I'll answer it before you ask. Well, simply put, it was a case of putting the cart before the horse. The committee, as was constituted, was unconstitutional. And I stand vindicated because the courts have put that to a stop to date. However, this does not mean that we should not vet the public debt, that we should not ask hard questions, we should not demand accountability and transparency of how our monies are being used. You see, the Constitution is not just a piece of paper that we pull out to wave during election cycles or when we want to sound important. It is the supreme law of the land, the anchor that holds us steady amidst the political and economic tempests that blow through this nation. If we disregard it when it's inconvenient, we might as well be setting sail without a compass in a stormy sea. And that, my dear friends, is a recipe for disaster, much like our current fiscal policy. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. And I want to say this as well, because if we remember, there was one meeting that the former Chief Justice, Willie Mutunga, attended, and he raised concern as he looked at the new cabinet secretaries that had since been appointed that were attending the NCAJ meeting. And he raised concern that the previous president, then Uhuru Kenyatta, refused to obey court orders. And it's a trajectory that he continued to ignore court orders, irrespective of him being reminded, the courts asserting themselves. He continued to disobey those court orders. Little did he know, the moment he ceased to be the head of state, the same state that he thought was supreme came to his doors, and he was at the courts trying to save his son. And so these same courts, this same constitution, should not be treated as a piece of paper. Because even those who deem to try to ignore the constitution, deem to try to ignore the laws of this nation, when they step down from the tenets of power or cede to hold power, they'll be rushing those courts to protect them as well. So this is a message that needs to ring clear to those who perceive that they're in power, because power changes. And the unfortunate thing is that the face of government never changes. So if you think that when you cease to hold those positions of power that they will remember you were once an important person, life will teach you otherwise. We find ourselves at a critical juncture in our nation's history, where the Law Society of Kenya must and has indeed stepped up to guide both the government and the public in legally addressing the complex public debt crisis we are facing. Public debt, in essence, is a binding commitment, a promise made by the government to borrow today with a pledge to repay the future. However, this commitment is not merely an agreement between the government and its creditors. It's a pact between the current generation and those that will follow. This pact imposes significant legal and moral obligations on the government, obligations that profoundly affect our innocent children. Kenya is not deficient in legal frameworks for managing public debt. Our constitution's draft has laid out a clear guidelines, and our public finance laws specify what is required. So why have we arrived at this precarious situation? Was there a breach of these laws that led us here? Before we can chart a path forward, we must first untangle the events that brought us to this moment, no matter how difficult or revealing that process may be. It is crucial to remember that the Constitution and the public finance laws are the tools through which the people empower the government to act on their behalf. When the government borrows, it does so with the expectation that these actions are in the best interest of the nation, and not just for the present, but for the long term. When public debt spirals out of control, as we are witnessing today, the trust placed in the government is broken. Excessive debt hinders the state's ability to perform its essential functions, such as providing education, healthcare, ensuring economic stability, and protecting the vulnerable. When debt is mishandled, it undermines the very foundation of our social contract. This is where the law must intervene, not just to regulate, but to safeguard, ensuring public borrowing is carried out with transparency, accountability, and a strong sense of justice. As we gather here today, it is clear that we are not merely lamenting our woes, we are strategizing, we are planning, we are making a stand. Public debt, when responsibly managed, can be a tool for development. But in Kenya, it has been akin to giving a teenager a credit card with no spending limit, an experiment that rarely ends well. Our public debt has ballooned over the past decade at an alarming rate. It has grown so large that at this point, it might as well have that we have a problem. We must be willing to confront it, to hold those responsible to account, to push for reforms that will prevent this from happening again. This is where the Law Society of Kenya stands firm. We are not just lawyers in black robes shuffling papers in courtrooms. We are defenders of the Constitution, advocates for justice, and where necessary, the thorn in the side of those who seek to trample at the rights of Kenyans. This assembly is a critical step in our collective journey towards fiscal responsibility and public accountability. It's a platform where voices from all walks of life, civil society, government, the private sector, and everyday Kenyan can come together to find solutions. We must ask ourselves tough questions. How did we get there? What mechanisms failed? Who benefited from this unsustainable debt, and who is paying the price? And most importantly, how do we prevent this from happening? I say sometimes that as we discuss this debt question, we are not talking about the debt bonds that we have taken, the first bond issue. How much did we take? Where is the contract? Have we been able to see it? How much was spent in the country? And which projects can we identify? And then the second bond. And then let's talk about who helped in fundraising for that bond. Because these international organizations have law that bind them in their countries, that also frown upon corruption, and not the kind of frowning in our country where your matter can be resolved after some time. In those countries, the matters cannot be resolved. You'll be held accountable. So let's start from the first bond issue. Let's have a clear discussion. Where did that money go? Can we identify those projects? Who are involved? Where is our first Auditor General? I remember once that he had a discussion that he wanted to audit the first debt that was called for the country. And that didn't end well at that particular time. But if there's a time to call him at the table and have that discussion, the time is now. The answers, I believe, lie in a combination of prudent economic management, robust legal frameworks, and an active, informed citizenry. We must ensure that our public finance management systems are not just theoretically sound, but practically effective. We must push for transparency in all financial dealings and demand that those who mismanage or misuse public funds are held accountable. And we must engage every Kenyan in this process, because at the end of the day, it is the ordinary citizens who bear the brunt of corruption and mismanagement. I'm reminded of a story as a young lawyer that a client came to me when which he described as a small financial issue. And as our discussions proceeded, this small financial issue involved a mountain of debt accumulated through a series of bad decisions and poor advice. And when I asked him, why did he come earlier? Why didn't he seek legal advice earlier? And he replied that he thought it wasn't a big deal until it was too late. Kenya is that client today. We cannot afford to wait until it's too late to address our debt crisis. We must act now with urgency and resolve. The Debt and Anti-Corruption Citizen Assembly is a critical part of that action. And I commend TISA, the Okoa Uchumi Coalition, and all partners involved for their tireless efforts. As we seek solutions, I propose the following measures on our part as advocates. A comprehensive public debt review. We must urgently conduct a transparent public review of our public debt finance laws driven by the Office of the Auditor General. This process should engage the public and other stakeholders to rebuild trust and ensure accountability. Strengthening the public finance laws. We advocate for legal reforms that will mandate full disclosure of borrowed funds, usage, and impose strict penalties on those who misuse public funds. Our laws should prioritize public interest and protect the vulnerable from fiscal mismanagement. Independent Fiscal Council. We propose that there should be an establishment or independent body composed of professionals across disciplines to oversee public debt management. This council should ensure that changes to the debt ceiling or significant fiscal policies undergo thorough public scrutiny. I dare say, even as we are looking at the question of what is public participation, and I hope our courts will stand with the people of Kenya, is that we need to be involved as a people. Having a member of parliament or an MCA does not take away your right for public participation under the Constitution. If that was the aim, then it wouldn't have been included. The Constitution must breathe life, and people must be allowed to engage in analyzing their finances. Empowering the Office of the Auditor General, we must strengthen this office to ensure independence and that the capabilities through legislation secures its budget and enhances its ability to conduct real-time audits on all public projects, ensuring ongoing accountability. Sanctions for misuse of funds. In cases where legislative independence is compromised, the Office of the Auditor General and the Controller of Budget should have the legal authority to sanction those misusing public funds with avenues for judicial review. And even if they would propose that they say moved to the, if it's prosecution to the Director of Public Prosecution, the same before it's tabled must be shared to the public. Sometimes the only way to avoid institutions engaging with one another is that the public is involved. Once a report is tabled to the public, then we can ask hard questions why action has not been taken. Institutionalizing Huduma Mashinani. The Huduma Mashinani initiative should be legally embedded in our public finance laws, enabling citizens to participate in community audits and hold service providers accountable. Enforcement of access to information. Strengthening access to information laws is crucial, with penalties for withdrawing information or withholding information. We've seen a series of letters done, and the Law Society has done quite a number with requesting for information, which most government bodies opt their right to silence because they do not want to place themselves in a difficult position. Yet this is a constitutional right. Information must be given, and we need to strengthen those laws with penalties for those who refuse to give information. Our engagement as the Law Society with international bodies. I feel that it's time that LSK should have also the ability to formally engage with international financial institutions like IMF and World Bank on legal matters concerning fiscal policies. That's the only way that we can also ask hard questions to these international bodies that continue to raise the curtain or turn a blind eye towards what is happening in the nation, and continue to give money to a government that people find is not accountable to the finances that it's given to it. Protecting civil society and the media. To safeguard the role of civil society and the independence of media as critical players of accountability in reporting and addressing the misuse of public funds. We cannot have clear accountability and transparency discussions when the same media is attacked, the same media is gagged, the same civil society is subject to attack by the different government institutions for standing up for what is right. So as a nation, we ought to also put some level of accountability, that even these international institutions and international bodies that are saying they're standing with the people of Kenya, they must demand protection of civil society and the media to be able to carry out their role. Review of projects contracts, that the Office of the Attorney General should conduct an independent review of all project contracts, ensuring they serve the public interest. Strengthened collaboration between the Attorney General's office and the Office of the Auditor General is vital for robust legal oversight of fiscal matters. Let us make this assembly not just a forum for discussion, but a launching pad for real change. Let us move from rhetoric to action, from complaints to solutions. Let us ensure that the Constitution we proudly uphold is not just a document of principles, but a living, breathing guide to governance that protects the rights and dignity of every Kenyan. Let us engage in these discussions with the seriousness they deserve, bearing in mind that the stakes could be higher. The decisions and recommendations that emerge from this assembly must serve as a roadmap for restoring fiscal discipline, safeguarding our economic sovereignty, and upholding the rule of law. Let us roll up our sleeves and get to work. After all, we say in the legal profession, justice delayed is. Let us not deny justice to the millions of Kenyans who are counting on us to make things right. And remember, no matter how deep the debt hole, we still have the power to stop digging and start climbing up. Can we say that we will do it together? Yes. Will we climb up together? Yes. Diana, what is the motto of today? Funga wezi. Pardon? Funga wezi tusikope. I end with the words of Mahatma Gandhi. You must be the change that you want to see. And I urge you, let us arrest all these thieves let us hold them accountable. Let's not give them an opportunity to collect more. As our nation, as a people, it's either we stand together or we watch as our future continues to dwindle. May justice be our shield and defender. Thank you.
So we clap for her until she sits, right? Thank you. And allow me to acknowledge the presence of a person that now I don't see anymore. That is our chief in the CBD, Fred Mbaka. I think he has stepped out. But we acknowledge his presence to attend and listen to the Citizen Assembly. Now, we have some work to do in the next few years, up to 2032 at least for now, because we will need to repay Eurobonds that the Republic of Kenya has taken. We'll be paying between 300 million US dollars and 1 billion US dollars per year. So in the years 2025, 2026, 300 million each, including 2027, the year of the election. 2028 will pay $1 billion. 2029 will pay $500 million. 2030 and 2031, each of those years will pay a combined total of $900 million. 2032, at the next election after the next one, will pay $400 million. That is as it stands right now. Because you I had that. Because you don't know what else will happen. And this has an impact because when the Eurobond that you were clamoring to pay in June, worth $2 billion, of course, part of it paid earlier, $2 billion in 2014 was worth 174 billion shillings. In February of this year, it was worth 310 billion shillings. You see the difference and the impact it has on our finances because we still collect revenues in Kenya shilling. Now, there's a gentleman who is coming from the Control of Budget, the Office of the Control of Budget, Harith Sheikh, who is the Principal Fiscal Analyst on Public Debt. Please join us on stage. And as he does that, remember there has been a bit of change of policy from a debt ceiling of 10 trillion shillings to a debt anchor of 55% of the GDP. Where's Harith? I'm looking for Harith, but I'm told he has stepped out. In the meantime, I think we invite Javan Tim to give us a breather, then we can continue with the program. So he'll be coming to respond to some of those questions. I'll remind him. Javan Tim?
J to the A. Viva, comrades, viva. Viva, comrades, viva. Ah, nice. Mbona mnaogopa viti za mbele? Ama change is being made from behind? Huh? You know, we are coming up with new styles every day. So, my name is J to the A to the V-A-N to the T-H-E to the P-O-E-T. Javan the poet. Mmesikiza ama nirudie? Nirudie? J to the A to the V-A-N to the T-H-E to the P-O-E-T. Javan the poet. So I'm going to give you two pieces. One is dedicated to us, the people. Change starts with us. Then the second one is dedicated to those soldiers that we've lost, trying to fight for this nation, and of course the fight is still on. Sindio? The fight is still on, Sindio? The fight is still on. Yes. Viva, comrades, viva! Viva! Viva, comrades, viva! Viva! Tuna hustle kuwa sonko wakati kupata job na cash imekuwa so slow ka movement ya konokono. Mikono zangu hazifiti in my pocket, juu zao ziko in kama charger na sockets. Wanabonga mob kama product ya safu, ongea taarifu, unataka change safu, utapata kura tu ndio arif. One nation tumelan one lesson, kupata change mi na wewe ndio one mason. Wazee walisema penye nia pana njia, niko stage hata sijapata njia, naitishwa mia. Weird. Hatu hike siku hizi juu mountains zimecome home na prices za goods. Hatuna kura zile tunazo tunauza. How we fools. Who smarter nao ni kiwanja wanakula kwao. Life's good for them, wanatumia words kama wow. Tap zikiflow na maji badala ya hewa, nikiishi kwa nyumba after election badala ya hema, nitajua kuna change. Juu sijui difference ya tao na so kwa duka kuna change. Paper bag hazina weight, hata nyumbani hatuna kazi ya plates. Nitaona kesho, I guess. Nitaona kesho, I guess. Nitaona kesho, I guess. Naingia shule kusoma, mwalimu anagoma, na graduate chuo kikuu naona notice board kusoma nikitafuta vacancy. Hii subject inaitwa experience, kuona ama hii degree ni ya jobless corner. Ambulance imekuwa too fast kutupeleka kwa Grim Reaper. Juu ku maintain life, health services too expensive, death is cheaper, kishibe excess Turukana meals ni shida. Kids dying daily ni msiba. Biashara ni hasara, na uza sukari ya nyumbani 100. Ya magendo na punguza kadhaa asilimia. Fungua macho uone who's to blame. Ningekuwa mrasta ningesema I and I. Gapi ya pua na richi na widen, itabidi maskini wote waokoke ndo one good life in heaven. No na joke, it's never too late. Get your vote, be wise. Toka kwa life ya church mice. Alivyosema Samora Machel, the struggle continues. Thank you. This one is dedicated to the fallen soldiers. Senzenina,
Senzenina, Senzenina, Senzenina, Senzenina, Senzenina, Senzenina, Senzenina, Senzenina.
Wanasema low, kazi ya gani kublow holes kwa heads na chest, si kuprotect. Ni contest ya nani anangusha wengi, nani anajaza meli, nani anashinda hesi juu system ziko messy. Walisema shoot to kill, bodies all over kwa screen. Kama mbaya ndio tambos, tunamaliza generations. Ama pair lawyer uniform, pair judge uniform. Mkuwe wote kwa streets, mshike muinvestigate alafu mkill. Familia za victims zilipie bullets, pate pay rise. Ama pathology wa gavana moja wapate clients. Juu wewe, na wewe si enforcer. Wewe ni killer breed. Wewe ni killer breed. Wewe ni killer breed. Wewe ni killer breed.
Senzenina, Senzenina,
Killer breed.
tayari, sitasimama
Siwasikii.
maovu yakitawala, sitasimama.
Welcome on stage. We put our hands together as he comes.